Hey, it's EK Erica Knox, and welcome back to yet another episode of Two Things Can Be True here at Women of Tomorrow. Y'all, we have had an incredible season so far. We've dived deep into all things grief and growth, the blessing and burden of independence versus interdependence, everything from love and pain and relationships, and everything in between. And we've come to the realization that two things truly can always be true. And so I'm really excited for this episode where we're going to get into some questions from you, the audience, about all things growth and grief, independence, interdependence, love and pain, vulnerability, and everything in between. So we got a question on our first episode about grief and growth and how to navigate that process. Oftentimes we realize that grief is a reality check. It seats you, it's somber, but also the growth that comes thereafter is a faith check, allowing yourself to say that from this process, I am going to grow into something I couldn't have imagined growing into. And so to that, I will say, one, give yourself some grace. Grief is a wave of emotion. It comes in 5 stages, and also trauma comes in 5 stages. And so you have to recognize where you are along that spectrum. You could be in the freeze or flight mode. You could be in fawn where you're disassociating and completely don't want to deal with this thing because it's so heavy. So let's start off this conversation by recognizing that you should be giving yourself immense grace. But sometimes grief gives us an opportunity to take a pause, to think about where we're grounded, and to reassess what is really important to us. In the spirit of two things being true, where grief and growth can coexist, know that grief can allow you to grow closer and deeper and more intimate with yourself emotionally, so you have more control over your mind, your thoughts, and your ideas. Take this moment to dig deep, think about where you are currently grounded, what is really important to you right now, and add that to your priority list. Do not suppress those emotions that show up in this season. Allow them to guide you to deeper versions of yourself with more empathy, more love, more patience, more peace, and everything in between. Grief can work for your good, and I'm praying that you find peace in this process, knowing that it will only lead you closer to that person, that place, or that thing that you lost. So on episode 2, we talked about all things love and pain in relationships, and how sometimes love leads you closer to pain, and sometimes pain leads you deeper in love. And so I want to just respond to the question about understanding when to let go. You are in a relationship and you just don't know when is the time to let go. I will say that when you feel like something is pulling from you more than it's pouring into you, that is the perfect time to detach from the situation. That's the perfect time to prioritize your peace in your mind in order to preserve yourself. Along the journey of choosing to love someone, yes, you open yourself up to disappointment and betrayal because you're vulnerable, but that doesn't mean it has to be to a fault. You don't need to weaponize your love for the sake of seeing how much you can handle in terms of pain. So self-preservation in this season is so important. You have to preserve yourself. If you are not anything to yourself, you cannot be anything to anyone else. So in this moment, have the courage to let go when you realize that you are pouring so much into this thing that you are losing yourself. If that sounds like you, this is your sign. Let it go. And I don't just mean leave. I mean, let it go and have peace with your decision, trusting that you were there for yourself in this moment more than anyone else could be there for you. And now, as you heal from that journey of experiencing pain in relationships, I want to give you 2 practical things that I've done in order to really allow myself freedom from the situation. One, practically, stop calling that person. Stop going back to that place. Stop getting into that environment that once hurt you. It's time to cut ties. And secondly, forgive yourself, honey. Forgive yourself for every time you knew better, but you didn't do better. It is okay. We all do it. Even the moguls of the world. We make mistakes. We get caught up. We backslide and we slip back into that thing. But now is the moment where you forgive yourself. Give yourself grace as you are growing through this thing because you're growing to new heights. Forgive yourself of everything that you've done and step in knowing that we're starting a new chapter. Now, for the episode on understanding versus disagreement, child, sometimes we have to agree to disagree. And the question that we received is basically asking about how you've not been able to come to a middle ground with your friend or that person in general. And honestly, you don't know how to overcome it because you love that person, you care for them, but yet we're just not seeing eye to eye. Number one, I want you to drop your ego and welcome in empathy. Welcome in empathy allows you to sit in someone else's seat and think about why they may have done that thing, how it was possible for them to do that thing, and whatever it is that you guys are not able to see eye to eye on, when they share their piece, you're able to at least listen to understand, not listen to respond. And secondly, practically, yes, and. You can say, yes, I hear what you're saying, and I disagree, while owning your value, owning what's important to you, and really sinking in the fact that maybe this may be a sign that we need to part ways, or maybe this may be a sign that we need to communicate more effectively so we can understand and show up for each other. And just as I mentioned in the past episode, now is the perfect time when you're facing disagreements and you're trying to come to an understanding to drop that ego and pride and pick up that empathy and perspective, okay? Now is the perfect time. Let's do it. Now, on the episode where we discussed all things interdependence versus independence and the blessing and the burden of both of those two things, we got a question from someone who feels like they're losing their sense of self. And honestly, they're in a relationship, but feel like they don't want to toggle between codependence disguised as interdependence. So to the person that really resonates with that story, I want to let you know that it is okay to be loved. It's okay to feel seen. It's okay to feel like your loved one is your safe space to land, but also recognize when you're toggling along the lines of codependence, where nothing in your life matters more than this person or that thing, and it becomes unhealthy. You lose your sense of self because you're so invested in them that you've silenced your own voice. And now is the time to recognize when to take a step back and really lean into your own voice, your own perspective, and what really matters to you. When is the last time that you've catered to yourself? When is the last time that you've had a different perspective from that loved one? When is the last time you said, I'm going to try a new hobby. I'm just going to go out there and do something alone or go out to eat for myself and treat myself. And so when you're toggling along the lines of interdependence, it's beautiful that you have someone that you can depend on, but also knowing that you are also someone to depend on. So bringing yourself back to the reality that you can depend on yourself. Your perspective matters. You can go out and have new hobbies. Your life matters outside of that person. Remember that if you don't got you, nobody else will. Just like Neo said, I'm a movement by myself, but I'm a force when we're together. Like, that is powerful. We're a force when we're together, but don't ever get it twisted. I'm a movement by myself, so remember that you are a movement by yourself. Moving along, on the episode on the rookie and the vet, we talked about how sometimes it feels like you quite mastered this thing, and then sometimes it feels like you're starting from scratch. And sometimes you feel like you are in a boat. Sometimes you feel like you are a rookie and a vet, where you're starting from scratch in one area, but you've mastered another, or you've mastered one and can't quite grasp this other concept. So the question that we received is about staying motivated in that space. You're surrounded by people who have reached amazing heights in this thing that you want to reach heights in. And you're honestly like, dang, I'm really a rookie in this season and I don't know how to stay motivated. I don't feel supported. If this is you, I want to remind you that the process is pivotal. That's the power stance, is when you commit to the process of growing. I realize that at some point, even though I'm surrounded by vets, I don't feel the entitlement that the vets are supposed to pour into me because my process may look totally different, one. And two, I may be called on this earth to surpass what they are even doing. And so recognize that you may be the blueprint where you have to go through the process in order to conquer the process and get to that actual destination. And secondly, another way to stay motivated is to remember your why. Why did you even start this process where you feel like a rookie again? Is it so that you can expand your palette or expand your mindset? Is it so you can expand your portfolio of businesses? Recognizing my why always brings me back to a good space because it reminds me of why I started the journey, why I'm committed to the journey, and what I'm going to gain on the other side. So remember not to focus so much on the when, just focus on the why. Now, let's dive deep into that episode where we talked about all things success versus setbacks and how honestly you can leverage your setbacks for even further success. We got a question about knowing when to pivot and when to persist. Now, let me just say this one thing nice and clear. Pivoting is not a bad thing. Pivoting proves that you can sustain in different lanes in a way that others cannot. And so as you think about pivoting, I want you to realize that it could be your superpower if you use it correctly. So when I think about pivoting, I like to give myself these 3 options and then to assess the situation from those lenses. So number 1 is whether I'm going to pivot, I'm going to persevere, or I'm going to perish. Pivoting just means that you may want to take a different approach to the same goal or a different approach to the environment overall. So it's nothing bad about pivoting because you can choose to pivot just to make an adjustment or because you realize you want to be more innovative with your idea. So if something isn't gaining traction, that doesn't mean that you have to just allow it to perish. If it's not gaining traction or yielding the results that you want, it may just be time to pivot to a new content format, to a new version of that idea, or to allow more collaboration so you can have something that's more transferable. Now let's get into the persistence part, really persevering to the point where things are not yielding results and it looks like it may be a wasted opportunity. Sometimes all you need to do is just push forward a little bit more until actually get some progress that you can see and feel and that's tangible. So in this moment, recognize when it's time to just keep pushing. Just because you don't see results in 1 day or 2 days or 3 weeks doesn't mean that it's not working. But you won't know until you go at it enough times in order to actually give it some proof of concept. Now, when to perish, when to throw the idea away, throw the business away is when it's costing you literally. It's costing you mentally, it's costing you financially, and it's proving to be ineffective. When it's proving to be ineffective and you're hitting the same bump in the road, if you cannot pivot and change the strategy and that works, if you persevere and that still does not work, that is when you perish the idea. That is when you literally throw in the towel and it's okay to quit because with every success comes a setback. And sometimes the setback sets you up so that you can actually have clarity and a really good comeback. And so recognize when it's time to pivot, persevere, or just perish the idea. Now, as we take a look back at the episode on self-acceptance and self-improvement, honestly, I found myself at a crossroads because I am so ambitious, but I'm also very keen to give myself grace and love throughout the process. And that's exactly what I want to encourage you to do. So we got a question about how do you balance that? Knowing when to pour more into your self-improvement cup and when to pour more into your self-acceptance cup. And honestly, it is a delicate dance. You can be a work in progress and a masterpiece at the same time because every stroke of the paintbrush of your life's journey is needed in order to create the work of art that you are. And lastly, remember that the goal is not perfection. As you can imagine, on the journey to self-improvement, honestly, trying to strive for more puts yourself in a vulnerable space. So it's important that as you are vulnerable and choosing to go to new heights, you're giving yourself grace, you're giving yourself compassion, and affirming yourself along the way. Now, as we tread forward, let's get into the idea of strength as vulnerability and vulnerability as strength. We really talked deeply about the fact that vulnerability is not winning or losing. It is just simply choosing to show up despite not knowing what the outcome can be. And that's what happens when you allow the full range of your emotions to show up. So we have a question about how to do so in the workplace, okay? How to show up vulnerably without feeling or being seen as weak in the workplace. And that's nuanced because oftentimes in the workplace, you're taught not to be vulnerable, not to show the real you, to code switch. But I believe there is power in being authentic to yourself. And if anything, vulnerability will only lead you closer to the community in your workplace that can support you on the journey. Imagine using that vulnerability as fuel in order to show up as the best version of yourself, in order to show up with all of the creativity, all of the insight, the innovation. Why? Because you chose to feel deeply about that topic and decided to put your heart into it. So I encourage you to use those D's and those C's, the discernment and compassion, to really navigate what it is that you want to do in your vulnerability and how you want to show up as authentic as possible in that space. Now, let's finally get into the idea that you can be both optimistic and realistic. You can both lean into the optimism of believing big and expecting great things while also being realistic about the challenges that are to come. Now, when I think about resistance one, you have to be grounded. You have to know that in the realism optimism world, resistance is guaranteed. When I have a great idea, it's immediately met with resistance because it's going against the grain. And so what I need to be is extremely grounded in my self-confidence to understand why I'm even going after this idea, and two, why people are resisting. Is it challenging their uncomfortability? Is it something that is challenging the narrative? And really taking pride in that. So when you are met with resistance, dig deeper into your roots and ground yourself so that you won't be so easily swayed by the things that are happening. Positioning yourself to be grounded enough that you know that resistance will come, setbacks will come, and obstacles will come, but I will always be positioned for the best outcome. So now we've gone through pretty much every episode for this season, and the questions, oh my God, y'all are coming with the questions, and I love that we can keep this conversation going. Two things can be true is not just something I'm asking you to believe. It's something that I'm hoping me and you and I can live out together as a lifestyle of really embracing the complexities of life and not running away from the nuanced truths that oftentimes exist together. They exist at the same time and they can be conflicting, but they can also, say it with me, work in your favor. So the topic that I think really, really resonates with me and has impacted me most personally is number one, grief and growth. I have experienced immense grief where it's led me so much farther away from my mother and from the places that I miss, but it has led me so much closer to them at the same time. It's led me closer to my mother in the essence of who she was, and in doing so, it led me closer to me. And that brings me to the second topic that I feel really, really deeply about and that directly impacted me. It's strength and vulnerability, because as you know, throughout this season, we have dived deep into all the mushy things, and it's been such a beautiful conversation because I truly believe that the more vulnerable I am, the more true and authentic I am to myself, what I think can now paint my reality. And it's always been that way, but I just had to choose that thought as truth. If I had not given way to my vulnerability, I would not be EK the mogul. And so I'm really, really grateful for those two topics. And I'm also grateful that y'all did the hard work with me of even acknowledging these things as something we want to work towards and work through together. The fact that you've been on this journey with me and you have continued to stick it out and use your journal or your printer paper, whatever it is that you do, to put pen to paper to get those thoughts out and validate how you feel and honor your emotions. It's been an honor. I'm so grateful, and I can't wait for us to continue the conversations. You already know the work doesn't end here, so if you've missed any of the episodes before, this is the perfect opportunity to go press play to episode 1 through 9 and go ahead and binge them. And if not, look, we'll be coming with more insights, more mogul mindset, more about two things that can be true on this journey so that we can thrive and show up in such a fulfilling life. So thank you so much for tuning in with me for not one, not two, but 10 weeks of Two Things Can Be True. We've kept the conversation going. We've dived deep into all of the mushy and amazing things and the beautiful complexities of life. We have really done our big one, okay? So round of applause for all of the Two Things Can Be True family, and welcome to a new journey of yet again, two things that can be true. Thank you so much. It's your girl, EK, Erica Knox, and I'm checking out for now. See you soon.